Welcome to the Wired to Hunt podcast. This week on the show, I'm joined by Scott Bestul, Field & Stream's longtime whitetail columnist, to discuss tactic and mindset shifts that can help you make the very most of these final weeks of the hunting season. All right, welcome back to the Wired to Hunt podcast, brought to you by First Light and their Camo for Conservation initiative. Today, we are going to discuss how to save your hunting season, how to make the most of these final weeks of the year, especially if your hunting season has not been going the way you want it to. If you have been struggling to fill a tag or kill a mature buck or kill that one target buck, or if you have been burnt out, stressed out, frustrated with the season, you are who we're talking to here today, because I guess I am you. I am that person. I have had a hunting season that has frustrated me, befuddled me, confused me, stressed me out. And, it's interesting timing because a new film of mine came out just a week or two ago on the MeatEater YouTube channel. And the kind of underlying theme of that episode was this epiphany that I had a couple years back that, if you're a longtime listener of the podcast, you've heard me talk about. But a few years ago, this was after the 2021 season, I kind of realized that I had been getting burned out on this stuff. I was going too hard. I was putting too much pressure on myself. I was doing a bunch of things that were kind of taking the fun out of hunting because I was so obsessed with killing a mature buck or so obsessed with quote unquote success. And I tried to kind of right the ship after that. And in many ways I have. In many ways I've learned from that. I've gotten better at certain things. But on the flip side, I also have, at times fallen back into those old ruts. I have experienced some of those same feelings. I think it's probably a combination of just who I am personally and also just the fact that, chasing mature bucks all over the country and trying to do it consistently, successfully is just inherently a thing that's going to be stressful and super challenging. You layer on top of the fact that I'm very goal-oriented, hard driving, and I guess tough on myself. All those things can be recipes for some adversity, recipes for, not always stuff being rainbows and butterflies. But I have also realized that, and this is something I realized a few years ago and continue to remind myself of, is the fact that it is a shame to ever let hunting bring you down, right? It's supposed to be a thing that's fun, that is enriching, that's invigorating, that fills your cup, shouldn't be draining your cup. And what I've gotten better at doing is catching myself in those moments when I'm feeling that way, and hopefully having enough self-awareness to step out of it and snap myself to and say, hey, you got to start making some different decisions, or hey, you got to chill out. This stuff doesn't matter that much. That's been my big thing over the last 5 years, is working through this, because I love deer hunting, but sometimes I'm so obsessed with hunting deer that I lose that. And that's a mistake. And that's what today's episode is all about. It's about how we can have success as deer hunters, but also don't lose the fun and the joy in it. My guest today is someone who's dealt with this himself, Mr. Scott Bestul. He has been a longtime columnist for Field & Stream magazine, a very experienced and, as he put it, proficient whitetail deer hunter, and someone who can share with us both tactical ideas, so some specific tactics and hunting strategies that can help us here to make the most of these final weeks of the hunting season. So we do discuss some late season ideas to help you fill a tag here in these last weeks or month of the year. But then also we spend time discussing, how to get back to the fun of it, how to make sure that we end this hunting season on a high note, not stressed out because we didn't kill enough deer or the biggest deer or the mature buck we're after, how to remember to focus on the important stuff and how to release some of that pressure, release some of that stress, and get back to the good stuff. Because it'd be a real shame to end the year upset at yourself or bummed out or frustrated because it wasn't as good as somebody else's season that you saw on Instagram, or you didn't kill as many bucks as you saw some guy on their YouTube channel. That kind of thing just is like I don't know, it's like siphoning the energy and the fun and the good vibes out of you as a hunter. I can tell you that from experience. I have had a number of moments this year where, looking back at them, I'm bummed out that I let myself get to that point, because I know better and I've learned a lot about myself over recent years, and it is it's easy to slip down that slope. I was in Kentucky this year on a public land hunt that was, going to be challenging. I knew it was going to be really challenging from the get-go, and spent a couple days hunting national forest with low deer densities. It was a 2+ mile hike into this area. Then we sat all day long, and then a 2+ mile hike out. We did this for several days in a row. We were wore out from that. On day 3 or 4, I moved to a different area of public land, and I was going to scout my way into this spot and try to, at first, I'd never seen this place ever, brand new to this area. I was going to slip in at first light and hopefully be able to navigate this dry creek bed and set up on an area that looked good on the map. Long story short, as I slipped in along this creek bed, I spooked deer after deer after deer. There was way more deer in this area than I realized, which is good. The bad news is that they were all along this creek, and even though I was slipping very quietly in a great access route way, it just seemed like it was a disaster. Kept on educating deer, and when I got to the area I wanted to hunt, the wind was not doing what it was supposed to do. There was big kind of hills and stuff in the area, and the wind, instead of the thermals getting sucked up this cliff face that I was going to hunt near, and the wind kind of blowing past this bedding area and then up the cliff behind me like I thought it would, instead it was bouncing off of it and recycling right through this bedding area. And so I'm stressed out about that now. I'm freaked out that the wind's wrong. I've educated all these deer as I've walked in there, so I finally sit there and I'm thinking and trying to figure out what to do, and can't figure out anything that I think's going to work. And it's quiet now, so every step I take is loud and noisy. And I decide, all right, this isn't going to work. I need to, find something that actually will work well. So I'm going to keep slipping down this creek. And so I go to the next spot on the map that looks good. And again, the wind's not doing the right thing. So now I get to a river, and I'm trying to think about how to handle this situation. So I start slipping down this river because there's another zone on the map that looks like it should be good. And I bet you it's far enough away from that cliff face that the wind will be consistent, and yada, yada, yada. Long story short, I spend half the day scouting this property. The wind is a mess everywhere I go. Numerous deer see me or hear me or wind me. It's kind of a disaster. And I just remember being so stressed out, so upset about things not going right and not knowing the right choice to make, and things all kind of just being a mess. I remember turning to my buddy Charlie, who was filming, and I just said, like, I hate this so much. Like, in that moment, I hated it. I hate this so much is what I said. And then looking back on that a few days later, it's just like, what a shame. I keep saying that, but what a shame that I'm out there hunting in what was a beautiful place with a bunch of deer, and I hated it. I don't want that to be the case. And I know I've got other friends, and there's other people listening who have probably been in some kind of situation like that, who have felt that way before, because of the pressure they put on themselves, or because of how they compare themselves to others, or because of whatever it is. We've lumped so much onto this hunting thing that at times, if we're not careful, if we're too obsessed with a specific goal or a specific deer, or what other people think about what we do or how we do it, or quote unquote success, whatever it is, there's all these different ways to do it, but there's many ways to poke holes in this boat. That is our experience as hunters. And today, with my conversation here with Scott, I would love to throw everyone a lifeline. I'd love to keep you afloat. Let's learn from some of my mistakes. Let's learn from maybe some of our own mistakes and make the most of these final weeks of the season. Let's save the hunting season. Scott's got ideas for how to do that from a hunting perspective and from a mindset perspective, making sure we're having fun, making sure we're making the most of this hunting season, and just sucking every last ounce out of it in a positive, super fun way. That's the plan for today's conversation. think we should not beat around in the bush anymore. Let's get right to it. Hope you guys enjoy this one. Here we go. All right, here with me on the line is Scott Bestul. Scott, welcome back to the show.
Nice to see you, Mark. I appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, right back at you. I greatly appreciate it. And last time we had you on the show, which is a while back now, I mentioned this, but I'm just going to say it again. I'm going to say it every time you're on the show. You were the very first person within the hunting industry, within this community we're in, that ever showed a semblance of support to me way back in 2008.
Really?
I
How
don't know if
about
you
that?
remember this, but this is a
I do
long...
remember I remember our first contact, and I'm like, this is a nice, young, eager guy. I hope he makes it. And here you are.
Yes.
You've made
So
it big time.
it's only been because of the help and support of a lot of folks like you. So I just want to again acknowledge that and thank you that I still remember it now. It's 2024 now. That was 2008. So it's been a lot of years.
Yeah.
And that response to that note was something that gave me some belief. And that was pretty important back then. So thank you again for that.
That's awesome.
And
Thanks for reaching out. I'm really honored that you thought of reaching out to me. So that says a lot. I'm flattered.
and that's exactly why I'm reaching out to you again here today, because I think back then you were someone who had a lot of experience and wisdom in the world of whitetail hunting, and you still today have that, but probably much more so since it's been, approaching 2 decades since that point. And really today's theme, the thing that brought me to you, Scott, was a little bit of angst, maybe a little bit of stress that I personally have been feeling this hunting season, and that I imagine a lot of other folks have felt at some point during the season, especially as we're edging here, towards that last third of the year, or maybe even less than that for some people.
Right.
Because it's so funny. We go through, January, February, March, and we're dreaming about hunting season. And then April, May, June, July, it's getting closer, and we're planning and we're plotting and we're excited and the anticipation is high. And then all of a sudden it's here, it's going, and then it's gone. It
It's so
just
true.
always seems to go so fast, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's just crazy. It was so funny. I remember joking with one of my hunting buddies. The season opened, and we were talking about it, our target deer and what are we gonna do opening week and blah blah blah. And pretty soon one of us just laughs and goes, "You know what? Next week it's gonna be late season."
Mm-hmm.
And
It's
here we are.
it's crazy. And every year I warn myself of that, and it still sneaks up on me. It still
Absolutely.
happens.
Yep.
It's wild how that happens. But how has your season been, Scott?
I really had a fun season. I have not put a tag on a buck yet this year, but I've passed up a couple, that I don't know, one. I remember I was in Minnesota. I rattled in my fourth buck of the year in Minnesota, which is, I think, a personal record for me.
Wow,
Um,
yeah.
but anyway, it was a nice, like 3-year-old 8-pointer, and came right in, stood there 15, 20 yards. I was shooting my recurve. I'm like, this is just like a gift. I mean, here he is. And I don't I don't know. I wasn't in the zone, and I let him walk. And I remember walking back to the truck, and I called my hunting buddy. I go, "You're gonna remind me of this day when it's December 15th and I'm freezing my butt off out there." And you're gonna go, "Why did we not kill that deer?" So anyway, but I mean, I really looked at it as it's kind of like catch and release trout fishing. You get the victory without having to deal with a dead animal and all that good stuff.
Yeah.
But anyway, so I've had a lot of fun, but I've not tagged anything yet. But I'm not giving up either. So yeah, this is actually one of my favorite parts of the season. I've always loved late. I can't explain it. Well, maybe we'll talk about it more. But
Yeah.
I like this phase of the season.
Well, that's perfect because you and I are both kind of in a similar boat then, because we still have goals and hopes for the rest of the year. Neither
Yeah.
one of us are tagged out and completely done with the year yet. So that said, I think that there's probably a lot of folks out there right now who are feeling the same way we are, who are feeling like the season has just flew by. And I'm sure they came into this with all sorts of hopes and dreams. And if there are people who still haven't filled their tag yet, who are maybe starting to sweat it a little bit, as you and I talked about before we started recording, we kind of want to cover two sides of this coin. One being how to deal with maybe some of the mental stress of this part of the year coming without having a tag filled, or maybe things not going the way you wanted. But then there's also just the practical side of things. Like, what can I do now if I still don't have a deer killed, or if I still don't have the target buck I'm after killed, or if I don't have meat in the freezer, whatever the goal is.
Mhm.
Um, what are some of those first few ideas that come to mind to you if someone is in this situation and they came to you saying, "Hey, Scott, I'm down to the last 2, 3, 4 weeks of the season and I haven't achieved my goal yet." What are some of those first couple ideas you might give someone on that front?
Okay, well, this isn't rocket science or probably news to many people, but I started moving my cameras around. Um, I'm a big from like well, as soon as summer goes into early fall, I go heavy on the mock scrapes. That's where almost all my trail cams go. And now I'm pulling them off of mock scrapes unless they're really tight to food. So anyway, I've pulled a lot of mock scrape sets, put them on good food sources, and I'm out there scouting. We had just a tremendous acorn crop last year, probably the most prolific one I've ever seen. And this year, consequently, it's not quite as good. But
Yep.
those few oaks that are dropping are going to be huge here in the next few weeks. And so, yeah, I'm putting my scouting boots back on and looking around and trying to identify those food sources. And so, yeah, I mean, that's kind of, it's almost like you got a season reset now. It's almost like going back into early season again, finding where the groceries are and, getting some scouting done and formulating new game plans. I get excited about it. I love it.
So you mentioned acorns. What are your other top late season food sources? There's a lot of options out there, but what really gets you excited?
Okay, well, we've got some food plots that are planted with late season in mind, with some brassicas and stuff. We also get in, I'm lucky enough to have my main hunting partner is a farmer, and so I get to hunt a lot of his spots, just on permission, and so he puts in some corn and bean plots. And anytime you get those this time of year, it's just it's kind of like a no brainer. Um, but yeah, I like the acorns. I look for good browse sources, south-facing slopes where there's, woody browse and grasses and forbs for them. And the colder we get in Minnesota here, those south-facing slopes really they play a huge role in, giving deer a place to bed and hang out for the day where their, ambient temperatures are a lot higher, and they just like to lollygag on those spots. So anyway, I'm doing a little shifting around now and looking for new food sources.
Do you ever One of the things I've historically spent a lot of mental energy trying to figure out is on any given day in the late season, trying to decide which of the possible food sources the deer might prefer. Do
Mhm.
you give any credence to, super cold weather pushing them to one type of food source while a warmer late season day might push them towards a different kind of food source? Is there any kind of condition that might help you make that decision?
Yeah, it's not a whole lot different than rut hunting. I find that if temperatures are, and everything is relative. So like if deer have been living in 40 degrees and all of a sudden it's 20, they freak out, think they're never going to eat again. Whereas if it's been 0 and all of a sudden it's 20, they're like, oh, yawn, I can sleep in all day and not worry
Yeah.
about things. But anyway, so the warmer the relative temps are, I tend to go into the timber more and kind of approach it like a rut hunt where I want
Mhm.
to be a little bit tighter to bed. I'd rather have a food source in the timber. Whereas if it's cold and we got snow on the ground, they're going to go for the easiest groceries, in my experience anyway. They're going to go for the easiest groceries they can get, and they don't care if it's daylight or whatever. I've seen some of the best bucks of the season on those super cold days. Just I mean, out there in a corn stubble or rye field, or I mean, just any no brainer food source, and they're out there in the middle of the day, trying to scarf up some calories.
Yeah. Yeah. So I've got a kind of a perfect scenario coming up for me. We're in our late gun season here in Michigan here very
Okay.
shortly, or we're in it right now. It's coming to an end very shortly.
Okay.
And basically, I have until this Thursday to use a firearm in my home state of Michigan, and then it's done. So I'm curious, when you're down to the last few days of your late season trip or late season opportunity, whatever it is in your case, and you're kind of getting desperate, do you have any Hail Mary type ideas for late season deer? Is there anything that you'll pull out of the bag of the tricks when you're down to your last couple chances? It's now or never, and you don't have the absolute perfect no brainer easy situation where it's perfectly cold and you've got the one amazing food source. Like that's an obvious one. But what if the obvious one isn't available? Any other tricks up your sleeve?
I'm well, I revert back to security cover, and south-facing slopes, and I push the envelope. I figure, like in your situation, you've got a couple days left. I mean, you gotta swing for the bleachers. You got nothing to lose. You might as well push your luck, and, yeah, if it involves, even still hunting through some of that heavier cover or along the edge of it, or, sometimes, especially if the temperatures aren't working in your favor that are gonna put the deer on their feet, then you gotta kinda, as the Wenzel brothers either always say, the tactic is either wait for the deer or go to the deer. And
Yeah.
so sometimes you got to go to the deer, and when when you're down to the wire and you got nothing to lose, you might as well push it. And it's fun, kind of fun to get out of a tree stand once in a while and go after them and see what you can do. So anyway, yeah, those. I'm not sure if that's hardy enough fodder for your answer, but I do push it. And I don't mind. I used to be a little more timid about it, but when you're kind of down to the wire and at the end, you might as well push because it's going to be a long season until they have time to respond to any pressure you put on them.
Yeah. Yeah. There's nothing to lose at that point.
Right.
Yeah, I've got a weird situation in that I have one tag left in Michigan, and the area that I've been trying to hunt is a zone that I've gotten to know well over the years. I've got a handful of permission properties in this area, and this has been the first year in probably a decade where the deer I thought I would be after this year have just disappeared. One of them
Mm.
disappeared the third day of the season. One of them completely changed his behavior from the last 2 years and just showed up a few times throughout the year. And then since November 9th, he's been gone. So I'm in a situation now where I've thought, I just don't know if I have a deer to hunt. And so I've been monitoring, I've been scouting, I've been moving cameras and keep on. I've been hoping and waiting and hoping and waiting that eventually the cold weather would push them into this kind of sanctuary I've created by not overhunting it, because I've been kind of waiting and waiting. Like eventually the pressure everywhere else has got to push them back into my place and start moving, or eventually the fact that all the other fields have been harvested, but I have some plots in my zone and there's a cover crop field and the neighbors, like there's got to be deer coming in. Eventually a big boy is going to show up, and it just hasn't happened yet.
Yeah.
Um, so it's been a weird deal where it's been waiting and watching, and nothing has arrived yet. But I'm at the point now where I think I just need to start taking some swings at the fences and just hope that maybe something's happening that I haven't been aware of, that I haven't been able to see, that I haven't been able to observe or catch on camera, and at least be out there and push it the last couple times, right?
I think that's a great idea. And one thing that I've learned, and I'm sure you know this, and a lot of your viewers do as well. Our cameras don't get everything.
Yeah.
It's always exciting and encouraging when you're like, oh, there he is. I've been looking for that deer, and now he's back. But just because you're not catching him on camera doesn't mean he's not back. He could be, well, he could be skirting that camera. He just, they don't have to be very far away for you to miss him. So it's yeah, I'm with you, man. I would push it. And it sounds like you got sanctuary and you got food. I mean, those are two pretty big deals this time of year.
Yeah. Yeah. Usually it works pretty well for the late season around here. And this year, I don't know. I don't know what's going on, but we've got a few more tries. So
Yeah. How late does your
we'll
archery
see.
season go then?
The archery season continues till January 1st.
Oh,
So
perfect.
I
Yep.
could I could still get it done with a bow, but it just seems um at least in Michigan, I've got a great chance with a bow until gun season opens, and then once gun season opens, you've got a chance, but it's very hard to pull it off in close quarters if you have to
Yeah.
go back to the bow. So,
Yeah.
hoping to pull it off with a firearm here these next few days, but if
Sure.
not, you could always pull the stick and string out again.
Yeah. You'll get them. Keep chasing them.
I appreciate that. I appreciate the belief. Um, so I think that brings me to kind of the next thing, which is why I originally reached out to you, Scott, which was, the other side of this whole thing. which is, when you're in pursuit of a deer. Lots of years I'm after one specific deer. This year it's
Mhm.
been a few, or you have some kind of goal, which more and more a lot of us serious deer hunters do, whether it be to kill a certain size buck or a certain age buck or a specific deer. All of that can lead to stress, frustration, burnout, all that kind of stuff. And it's not unique to me because I've talked to a whole lot of different people who feel this way. People who don't have, you know, you and I are a little bit unique in that our careers are wrapped up in this, but there's a whole lot of folks who just do this for fun,
Right.
who tell me the exact same things. I've got a group text with a bunch of hunting buddies, and every year you can hear them and see them getting stressed out, burnout, frustrated, upset. And it always is kind of silly because we do this because we love it. We do it because it's fun.
Right.
But then somehow we let ourselves get so worked up in it that we sometimes get lost, I guess. Does any of that ever happen to you? Has that resonated with you in any kind of way?
Oh, absolutely. I think it's kinda built into the modern deer hunting experience, you know? I can remember as a kid when I started in the '70s, yep, I'm dating myself, but, our group, they didn't know half, they didn't know a tenth about whitetails that the average 20-year-old knows right now, it was just deer hunting was an event that you did every year, and it was just a bunch of fun getting together with guys and trying to kill any buck that you saw, and it's morphed into this thing that's completely different, and it's when you approached me with the idea for the show, I was thinking about my dad who's 95 and still deer hunting, still killing them. Got one with his
Wow.
crossbow this fall, and so anyway, he's seen this whole gamut of the early deer seasons in central Wisconsin, and we did a lot of we sat for a little bit, did a lot of driving, but we didn't know any deer. Every big any big deer that we stumbled into was just that. It was stumbling into getting struck by lightning. It was we didn't know what we were doing half the time. But
Yeah.
anyway, so then we started like, well, maybe we should sit more and start passing deer and blah blah blah. And that came with its own learning curve. And most of us were on board. And my dad made a comment about 5 or 10 years into that process, and he said, our hunting is in many ways better, and he said it's definitely safer, without the gang drives that we used to do. Um, but he said it's interesting because he says in a lot of cases it's not as much fun.
Hmm.
And I was like, ouch, but true.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, we had a gang of guys, my old Norwegian uncles and us tag along kids that were just trying, not to fall in the swamp and drown. I mean, it was kind of a gregarious, goofy, fun time that was really social and we weren't I mean, we were serious and that we pushed hard and we shot a lot of deer, but we weren't I don't know. We weren't this laser focused like we are today. Like you said, I mean, we turn, we start in spring with, shed hunting and spring scouting and summer trail cams, and all of a sudden we're building this campaign. It's
Hmm.
almost like we're trying to make a surgical strike on a deer or two that we're really after. And that just is a different experience entirely. So I think, and obviously, in my opinion, deer are a whole lot better at surviving than we are killing them, especially a mature buck.
Yeah.
And, we tend to forget, sometimes what we're up against. I mean, especially in, places like Michigan, where you are, and Minnesota, where I'm at. I mean, these aren't naive deer. These are deer
Yeah.
that's, they've been shot at and chased by predators since they wore spots. So they get 3, 4 years old. They're pretty darn smart, and we're just doing this part time. So yeah, it's easy to kind of get your expectations way up here and your hopes, way up there. And they can kind of hand you your butt pretty easily, and it's easy to get disappointed in that. I know that I mean, you don't get where you got in your profession without setting goals and working hard, and I mean, it's kind of hardwired into your personality, and a lot of modern deer hunters are that same way.
Yeah.
And so yeah, when some of those goals aren't met, I think it's real easy to get frustrated and discouraged and kind of pull your hair out. So yeah, yeah. My long-winded answer to your question is, yep, I've been
Yeah.
there.
And I think it also seems to be exaggerated. There's like two things going on. There's one which you just described, which is the fact that we've kind of turned hunting into like a military mission, in this campaign, as you described it, right? And then on the flip side, we also have then widened our social circles, and like our group of people we can compare ourselves against has grown
Right,
dramatically as so many folks have gotten on social media, and we've gone from just discussing our hunting exploits with our small group of friends to now maybe sharing it with hundreds or thousands of other people.
right.
And I think there's a little bit of a comparison culture going on that I think adds to that stress too. Um,
Sure can, yeah.
and then I guess, there's also some like, I mean, with you maybe, Scott, again, this is a little bit unique, but you talk to hundreds of hunters, I think, given in a given year or two, interviewing folks for articles and all these different feature pieces and all this different stuff, and you're looked at as someone who's supposed to share with us how to get this stuff done, how to do this stuff. You're an expert. You know the answers, Scott, right? Does that pressure ever get to you?
I I think I felt it at one time a little bit, but, Um, but for the most part, no. I consider myself more of a reporter. I've never considered myself an expert deer hunting. I'm a deer hunter. I'm a proficient deer hunter. I spend a lot of time at it. It's interesting. I was talking to Gordon Whittington, editor of North American Whitetail, a while back, and he said, "I don't consider myself a great deer hunter. I consider myself an educated deer hunter."
Mm,
And I'm like, "Yeah, that kind of makes sense."
yeah.
I know a lot of this stuff, and and I'm fortunate enough, like you, to be able to talk to some of the country's very best and soak up a lot of their knowledge like a sponge. But I've always considered myself as more of a reporter in what I do. I like to cover what's happening with deer hunting and deer management and deer biology. So I'm more of a conduit from the true experts to the general public, that the garden variety deer hunter, that I include myself in that number. So anyway, yeah. It's really funny though. My daughter, when she entered high school, she was, like all young teenage girls, she was worried about fitting in and are people going to like me and talk to me. And anyway, this nice looking high school boy walked up to her on, it's like the first week of school. And he said, "Are you Brooke Bestel?" And Brooke goes, "Yeah, yep, that's me." And she goes, he goes, "Your dad is Scott Bestel, right?" And she goes, "Yep, that's my dad." She goes, "Wow, he hunts deer for a living." And Brooke just laughed, and she's like, "Yeah, that's what he does. And if he hunted deer for a living, we'd all be starving right now."
Oh, that's pretty funny.
Yeah.
So that said though, how do you so I think one, the fact that you separate I think you just showed something that is useful for all of us, which is that you made a kind of delineation, or I guess you were clear to yourself about who you are and what your goals are. I think a lot of people feel pressure to be an expert or to be some amazing deer hunter or to be just like some guy they see on Instagram. And I think that leads to more stress. And maybe what you just described there, the fact that you're okay being a proficient deer hunter, but not being the best deer hunter in the world, is that something that you have actually thought about with yourself and like gave yourself permission to be like, hey, I'm going to be a proficient deer hunter. I'm not going to worry about being like one of these other guys who I report on and trying to be the hero or trying to be the expert or whatever it is. Is that something that you ever had to kind of work on as you were a younger hunter, kind of figure out your identity, what you're trying to be here or who you are? Or was that always just kind of obvious?
No, I think that's a great question, and I think it's something we all kind of need to look in the mirror and have a discussion with ourselves. Because yeah, I mean, it's really interesting. The first year that I got serious about hunting, mature big bucks, I actually killed two Pope and Young deer in 1 week. I shot one in Wisconsin on October 24th, and then a week later, I hopped the river in Minnesota. I killed another one. Both were great, biggest bucks I'd ever shot. And you kind of get this little, warm gush of feeling like, man, I'm pretty good at this.
Right.
Uh, and it didn't take me long to for the deer to teach me that, yeah, you really don't know very much. And, this is another thing that I'm going to sidetrack us just momentarily.
Sure.
Um, a lot of, the we've given rise in this hunting culture to the the role of a quote unquote expert, a guy that really has his stuff together. And there are those people. You and I both know them.
Hmm.
Just really, really good deer hunters that have the time to do it. But what a lot of us don't like to talk about, and I've actually heard a guy say, get kind of testy about this, and maybe you have too, that the role of luck in deer hunting, it's
Sure.
definitely a factor. You can't, I've told a lot of people, if you don't believe that there's luck involved in deer hunting, you're just not paying attention. You
Yeah.
know, you can know a whole lot about a buck and even an individual deer. And like I was talking to Tom Inderbo, one of the better guides in the Midwest, and he said, we were talking about early season deer hunting, and he said, we're talking about, patterning deer on their bed to feed pattern, and he
Hmm.
said, it's really easy to get misled on something like this because he said, I know the general area a lot of bucks bed. I don't know the bed that they lay in every night. I know their general area. Yep, he kind of likes to hang on this hillside, and he said I can have that pinned down right when archery season opens. And he said, but here's the thing. He says I can get him in a bean field one night and think, oh, okay, I know where general bedding area is. Now I saw him in a bean field. So I think he's on a pattern. He says, total hogwash. He says, that deer gets out of his bed at night. He's got 8 or 10 different places he can go. And it's just, do we know why he picks what he does? Most of the times not. We can make
Yeah.
educated guesses, but you could go sit that bean field 7 nights in a row, and that's not his pick that night. So you just weren't lucky.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, this is just my opinion. There are some guys that'll get real prickly and go, "Oh, well, if it's a northwest wind, he'll do it, and if it's southeast wind, he won't do it." And some of that is definitely true. But you definitely you got to have some luck on your side. Like I did that first year that I was dedicated to shooting big deer. I mean, I rolled the dice and I came up double sevens. And it doesn't
Hmm.
happen very often. So anyway, luck is definitely a part of it. So that helps to me. That helps take some pressure off. I can do everything I can do. Then the deer still's got to do what he's got to do.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah. Anyway, I did kind of derail us there. But yeah, I think it was. We all have to kind of make a conscious decision about, why are we doing this? And like you, I've been lucky enough to kill a couple, pretty nice bucks, and it was really interesting because I mean, couple of times I knew the deer. Kind of knew where they're hanging out. Went in there with a hope that I would shoot that particular deer, and a couple times I got lucky and did that. And it's really funny. So yeah, I found a mature buck. Did some sniffing around, used my knowledge, and I set up a stand, and I was able to get him. And I tell you what, the next day my world hadn't changed a whole lot. I mean,
Yeah.
I was the same guy. My kids just like, yeah, just boring old dad.
Yep.
My friends were like congratulatory, but it's like everybody else. 2 days later, they're like, "Did Scott get that deer this year? Or was that last year?"
Yeah.
So it's really easy to heap all this pressure on yourself, and it's like really you're the only one that's worrying about it. And so I did make a conscious decision that, um, I'm doing this because it's fun. I mean, I want to enjoy it. And what taught me that, what helped me kind of laser focus on that was I'm not only a deer hunter, like you, I'm a trout fisherman. I love chasing rough grouse with my dog and pheasants, waterfowl, and it's really interesting when I go out there and do those activities. I don't have those high goals for myself.
Yeah.
I catch a few brown trout on a dry fly, and I'm like, man, what a night.
Yeah.
I didn't know any of those trout. I didn't go out there to target them.
Yeah.
I just went out and I enjoyed a beautiful evening on a trout stream with a fly rod in my hand. And I went home at night thinking, man, life is good. This is a great world. And why can't deer hunting be like that? It should be
Yeah.
like that,
It
you know?
should. Why? Yeah, I've thought about that a lot too, and the exact thing you mentioned. I thought, man, all these other things I do can be just fun and enjoyable adventures and kind of serendipitous, and you see what
Yep.
happens and you enjoy it no matter what. Why is it that deer hunting has to be different? Why is it that I get so worked up and so wrapped up in it? And I
Right.
don't know if it's I don't know exactly why. Um, but part of it might be the fact that I and so many other people have attached goals to it, ambitious goals.
Yep.
And I don't know. I think there's probably pros and cons to that, to having these ambitious goals, to targeting mature bucks or to targeting the buck or to try to, fill a tag in this state and that state or whatever it is. But so many of
Yep.
us have all of these we come into every year with all these hit lists and all that kind of stuff.
Absolutely. Yep.
Is there something to be said for if someone's experiencing what we're discussing, which is this stress, this burnout, sometimes losing the fun in it, might it be a good idea to re-examine those goals? Because that's something I've started doing and started thinking about more seriously. Is is maybe I need to change those goals and rethink that. Is there something to that?
Oh, I totally agree. I think, goal setting is super healthy and, um, you know, this is how we get better, I mean, you I think it's pretty common, we look at a season and go, "Oh, I could have done this a little better, or I didn't scout hard enough in the spring, or, I should have moved that stand, I never got to it, or, blah, blah, blah." And so, yeah, the way we get better is set some benchmarks for ourselves and go out there and push it. But it's pretty easy for those goals, in my opinion, to get out of hand in a hurry. I know one of my cousins was, like he wanted to shoot a Pope and Young buck. So he got a 125 or a 130, beautiful buck. And then, oh, then it needed to be a, 140 or 150. And, you start climbing that ladder and it's like, when, when does that stop? Because it better stop pretty quick.
Yeah.
Because I mean, like you, I've hunted some pretty good places in my life. And I tell you what, 150-inch deer is a pretty doggone good deer no matter where you go.
Anywhere, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So, you can go to Ohio and, recognize all of the 200-inch deer that come out of Ohio. But you walk in there, and if you got if your hope is to shoot a 200-inch deer, I can almost guarantee you disappointment.
Mhm.
So anyway, yeah, I think you have to adjust and figure out if your goals are healthy ones. Anyway, I look at my dad and, he's happy with any buck, which is great. Sometimes I'd like him to hold out, and the only reason I want him to hold out is so that I can hunt with him more.
Yeah.
I know, but I tell you what, like this year, he shot a nice, 2.5-year-old 8 pointer with no brow tines, and there's definitely better deer on that farm that we hunt together. You know, and I would have liked to have seen him hold out a little bit longer just because I like to hunt with him. And once he
Yeah.
shoots his buck, he's done. But anyway, he's happy as a clam and he's 94, and I got to go, wait a minute, not my goal. He
Yeah.
met his goal.
True.
And he was just, he's ecstatic. I mean, we found that deer and he came running up to me and bear hugged me, and that was, goal met, happiness achieved, and that's the way it's supposed to be. So yeah, it's easy to let those things get out of control. And yeah. I mean, I think you just need to, as we've discussed, my personal philosophy is deer hunting is it's gotta be fun. I mean, why do it? None of us are doing this for a living. We don't need the meat to survive. Although I live, I quote unquote live on venison, buy very little beef. But if I don't kill my deer, I'm still not gonna starve to death,
Yeah.
not getting paid for any deer that I kill, I'm not getting celebrity endorsements or anything. So by golly, I better enjoy it.
Yeah.
And so then you have to look in the mirror and go, well, what are the things about deer hunting that makes me happy? And I saw you had a great picture in one of your articles about with you and two of your buddies. You mentioned about coming out of the woods and taking a lunch break with your friends. I'm like, that's the kind of stuff that's so much fun. You sit there and share a few stories and recharge your battery, and back out in the woods you go. And like you noted in a couple of those pieces, and I've done this too. It's like, man, I'd get out there at the crack of dawn, grind it out in a tree stand all day long, come back home, and of course you're disappointed. You spent 10 hours in the woods on a claustrophobic little hang on stand, freezing and probably a little bit hungry, and you didn't kill a deer. And sometimes you might not even see a deer for all that effort. So yeah, you're going to go home and you might be a little bit grumpy around your kids.
Mhm.
And they don't always appreciate the goal that you've set for yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's one of these things I found is that when I'll speak for myself, and I think this applies to other people too, from folks I've talked to, but I found that I feel because I have these ambitious goals, because I feel internal pressure that I got to kill a mature buck, or I need to kill a mature buck on every different out of state trip I go on, or I've got to kill the one buck I'm after here in southern Michigan, that I know the right things to do, and I know the plan that I put in place, and I know how much time and energy is required to achieve those goals. If I do not give 110% in pursuit of those specific goals, I will then feel bad or upset with myself, or feel like I'm not doing everything I should be doing and that I'm slacking or I'm not working hard enough or whatever it is. And so then because of that, you feel the pressure to hunt 13 hours straight every day, all day during the rut. Or
Right.
when you don't feel like getting up in the morning because you've done it 7 days in a row, you got to go still. Or when you're out there and you're sitting in the tree stand and it's 1 o'clock in the afternoon and you haven't seen what you've been looking for the last 3 days, you're sitting there beating yourself up in your mind like you should have done this, or you should have moved there, or you should have, or what do you do next, or how do you fix this, or what's going wrong? And you're just beating yourself up, and because of all of that, you are not doing the things that actually are fun, which is the going out and having lunch with your buddies, or the taking your kids to hunt with you, or whatever it might be, doing something that's a little bit different, the tactic like walking around still hunting or something that maybe doesn't give you the very best chance to kill the deer you're after, but it actually would be a fun change of pace. I constantly find myself waffling between those things and
Yep.
intellectually recognizing like, oh yes, that would be the more fun thing to do. But on the flip side saying, you know, the other side of me saying, well, you got to give it your all. You have to be the hardest worker. You have to be X, Y, and Z. How have you dealt with that, or do you deal with that?
Um, well, yeah, I mean, uh, you basically have I mean, you basically have, vocalized a lot of my journey. I've felt all those things, and, I was a competitive runner in high school and college, and so I knew all about goal setting and hard work and, yeah, not gonna miss a run. I don't care if it's Sunday and it's, 20 degrees and there's a foot of snow out. I'm going running,
Yeah,
and, and then after a while, it is funny though, because I mean, I see a lot of comparisons between athletics and hunting. They're both really physical, outdoor pursuits, at least for me, they were, and, I just got to a point with running where it's like, I'm kinda tired of competing, because no matter how hard you work, there's always somebody better than you, um, and it takes a toll on other parts of your life. And yeah, the competition it's great. It's joyous and fun, and when you have some success, it's so anyway. I think that was a good prep for me for hunting where I realized I realized that at some point with running, it's like, you know what? I'm not doing this to compete anymore. I'm just doing it because I love it.
yeah,
I like to stay in shape. I like to feel the gravel crunching under my shoes and the wind in my face. And, that's what I love about running. So I reverted. I quit the competing part and just ran because I loved it. And so I think I reached a point in my deer hunting career where it was kind of like the same. It's like, hey, you moron, you're not your personal worth is not judged by the number of bucks on your wall. Your kids and your wife don't care about that much. They want you happy, but they
yeah.
don't, "Oh, dad, it was only a 140." You never heard things like that.
No.
So anyway, I just kind of did a little reset, and it's like, you know what? What are the things about this sport that bring me joy? And a lot of it was going back to my roots, where I killed my first buck with a bow when I was a senior in high school, and it was a little basket racked 8 pointer I shot on public land in Iowa. And man, I tell you what, I rode that for years. It's just such a great hunt, and it did just about everything wrong, including missing my first shot at the deer at 10 yards. But anyway, it was just such a great experience, and it's just one of those things that hooked me on the sport. And, I start kind of reflecting on those things, like what are the happiest moments that you've had, and what about that kind of captured you, and trying to focus on those things. And I keep going back to my dad, but I get such a kick out of him. We'll go come meet back at the truck after hunting together, and I'm like, "See any deer?" No, but he said, "I had a chickadee land on my crossbow." And he was just, it's like a little 14-year-old kid, and it's like, well, it's not the first time he's seen that, but tonight it was a really big deal. And I'm like, that's the kind of stuff that, you know, we were just talking the other day. He said, "I remember this was," and honestly, goodness, this was 35 years ago. He's like, "I remember that night I saw 3 otters run past my deer stand." This is on the open timber, a mile from the nearest water. And he remembers that. So anyway, it's, you know, if you don't appreciate the woods and can't see the beauty of things happening around, if all you're worried about is getting an arrow or a bullet into that big buck, um, it might be, I'm not telling you it is, it might be time for a little recharge, a little reset. Because I've
Yeah,
been there. I know that feeling. You get
yeah,
frustrated, you get I'm not, like you said, I'm not working 110%. Why did I go pheasant hunting with my dog, instead of grinding out another 4 hours in that tree stand? Well, you know
Mhm.
what? Pheasant hunting with my dog is pretty doggone fun.
Yeah. You keep bringing up your dad and being out there with other people, and that brings up another one of these things that I've recognized and that I know, and I've tried to make an effort to change this, but I still fall guilty to it sometimes, which is the sacrificing of, like, the community side of hunting to pursue, like, solo success. And
Yep.
oftentimes, not always, but oftentimes, when you are, like, single-mindedly focused on trying to kill a buck, the best way to do it is to, do it on your own, get your own permission, or find your own spots, or hog that special place just to yourself because, if there's more people in there, it's going to be harder for you to kill that big old buck. Or because you're after this one deer, it's just you go, 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 go. And I have found myself because of that. Many times doing a lot of out of state trips by myself, a lot of times hunting properties by myself. Um, and then I'll catch myself and realize, man, sure would be fun to be doing this with a bunch of buddies or to share this experience with other people,
Yeah.
or to be out here with my dad or out here with my kids. And and oftentimes that falls by the wayside if you're just focused on the kill or just the big deer. And so
Sure.
and so I've recognized that as something that I personally have been trying to change and trying to
Mhm.
get better at and try to get back to. But I'm curious if that's something that you have any thoughts on or have seen in your own experience too.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, I've been going out to Northwest Kansas for 25 years, I guess, and lucky enough to have a permission spot to hunt out there. A great family that's just treated me like family, and I typically go by myself. Um, and anyway, last fall, I invited a friend to go with me, and we'd hunted turkeys out there before, so I knew, as we both know, you gotta pick your hunting buddies carefully. I
True.
mean, some of them don't appreciate the privilege that you're offering them by letting them hunt your spots. But I knew this guy was good as gold. He's a wonderful friend, and we were there for 106 days, and it was just great. I mean, we would text each other from the stand. What are you seeing? Blah blah blah. Meet at lunch, go do some scouting, hang another set together, and at night you had somebody to kind of bounce things off with. And I truly, I didn't realize it until about 2 days into the trip, but EHD had hit that area, and there were basically no deer. I sat for four days and never saw a deer from stand. Till
Oof.
it took me that long, and then we finally realized what was happening. But it was honestly, it was so much fun. I mean, if I'd have been out there by myself with that limited success, I'd be like, "Man, Bestel, you really suck at this."
Yeah.
I thought you knew something. But
Mm.
it was so great to have somebody to, you shore each other up, and, he missed a nice buck, and, I patted him on the back and said, "Well, next time you'll get him," and, it was, I don't know, it's just there is something about that camaraderie that's really for a lot of us, it's an important part of hunting, yeah.
Yeah. It seems to I think that oftentimes when I look back on the memories and the things that stand out from over all of the years of hunting, sure, the deer I've shot, some of them stand out and definitely are, memories that are special. But
Yeah,
then there's oftentimes those best memories, or even the best part of the memory of the deer isn't actually shooting the deer. It's like when your buddies come with you to help track it and you recover it and you celebrate
right.
that night, or when you
Yeah,
have your son or your dad or your family members with you, or all these other things that we do. But the best memories often are with other people.
yeah,
And that is it's something that I think has gotten lost in the last 10, 15, 20 years for a lot of the serious deer hunters.
sure.
Um, and I think we're missing out. And at least I can speak for myself. I have been missing out sometimes on that.
Yeah, easy to do, and I'm guilty as charged as well, and, yeah, like I said, I don't think I've hoarded my Kansas spot, but I haven't been, specifically oozing with generosity with it either, and, anyway, when I had my friend out there with me, I remembered how fun it was to hunt with somebody, and, yeah, it was great. So, yeah,
Yeah.
it's pretty easy, and we do and s I don't feel like and I'm sure you feel this way too. I'm not speaking for everybody. There are people that are perfectly happy to hunt solo all fall. They don't need that, and that's great. I mean, you've got my biggest thing is, you've got to find out what makes you happy, what brings you joy in that process. And if it's going out there by yourself, grinding away, day after day, and you are truly enjoying it, man, awesome. I'm happy for you. I wish I could learn from you. I wish you could rub it off on me a little bit.
So the flip side of that, or I guess kind of adjacent to that, is the comparison culture maybe that our deer hunting community has fostered. That's kind of happened by way of media and social media, and everyone's goals kind of growing more and more because of that, where you have a lot of people who get their identity maybe is defined by how big of deer they shoot or how many deer they shoot. Everyone's got these little scorekeeping boards going on with their Instagram likes or their Facebook comments or whatever it
Right.
is.
Yeah.
Everyone's a content creator now on TikTok or YouTube or whatever. Everybody wants the most views, likes, whatever for their big giant buck. There's a whole lot of ego in deer hunting these days. And self-worth sometimes being tied to that. And also the opposite. People feeling bad because they shot a little buck and they have to apologize for it, or, getting, a little bit of jealous deep in the dark parts of their mind when they see their buddy shoot a really big buck for the third year in a row or whatever it might be. How have you experienced any of that over your years? Do you have anything to share on how to deal with that, how to think about that, or how other folks maybe have shared with you how they've dealt with that?
Um, it's really interesting because I cover big deer for the magazine and the website all the time. I've been doing it for a long time. And it's really interesting. A few years back, I was really getting kind of sick of it because I would find out about a giant deer that somebody killed, and I would manage to contact the hunter. And this didn't happen every time, but it wasn't infrequent where their attitude was, what's in it for me? Am I going to get a free bow? Are you going to pay me for this? And
Yeah.
I was just like, "Oh, man, this isn't the reason we should be deer hunting," And I got, kinda disgusted with it and voiced that to my editors. I'm like, I'm kinda getting to the end of my rope with this thing,"
Yeah.
because they'd want and to our discredit, sometimes we did pay for big deer. I thought it was a mistake. But if it was a really big deer, sometimes they'd, give them a little bit of money. And anyway, we've gotten away from that. But an interesting shift has happened within the last couple years, and it's been really refreshing. And there have been some world class deer. I've talked to 4 or 5 guys just this fall that have killed deer over 200 inches, and they're like, to a guy or a gal, they're just like, man, I am so lucky. I've been so blessed to be in the woods with this critter and get a chance, and I didn't screw it up. I got a clean kill and blah blah blah. And I'm just like, hallelujah. This is how we should feel. And it didn't matter. I mean, most of them would know the score, but it wasn't like, well, yeah, but that guy got a bigger one, or
Mhm.
I was really disappointed because he broke off 10 inches. I don't know. It really gets to the point, in my opinion, where it gets kind of silly after a while, because it wasn't that long ago where it wasn't that way. We didn't have this, as you call it, comparison culture, and yeah, it's really kind of, it just strikes me as a little bit sad. Maybe I'm just an old fart and I don't. But anyway, um, yeah, I don't like it.
Yeah. Yeah, I
Do I
hear you
do I
on
have
that.
advice? I'm not quite sure. I'm not really sure how to deal with it. Except that, if if you drop the hammer or trip the release on a deer, you should be proud of that critter no matter what. His score, his body weight is, if you harvested that animal cleanly and ethically, then man, you should be proud, because it's not, especially if it's a mature buck, it's not that easy, as we both know. Um and for most of us it takes a lot of work.
Yeah.
So anyway, yeah.
But to your earlier point too, nobody else really cares. I think
Right.
we oftentimes trick ourselves into thinking that people care more than they do, or that
Right.
people notice more than they do, or that it matters. Right? We're
Yeah.
not saving lives here. We're not rocket scientists. We're not, curing cancer.
Exact
We're not doing anything really worthwhile at all.
Right.
Um, we're doing something that is inherently selfish. We are, feeding ourselves and our families, and we're doing something that gives us value personally. But, you know, whether or not I shoot a mature buck in Michigan or not this year, probably I'm the only one losing sleep over it. And if I
Yeah.
did end up miraculously still killing one later this year, people will notice for a half a second and then move on with their lives. Like you said, like my sons and my wife, they're not going to look at a buck I shoot. And, oh, geez, should have been bigger.
Yeah.
They don't
Right.
care. And I
Yeah.
think we probably all need a little reminder, like, really, this doesn't matter that much. It's not life or death. It should, if it's not, and when it comes down to it, if you are not enjoying the process, if you're not enjoying this moment, then you're missing the point because
Yeah.
nobody else is forcing you to do this.
Yeah, that's so great. I love you've articulated that just beautifully. And my editor at Field and Stream, Dave Hurtel, very well.
Hmm.
And our standing joke is, I really hope that the thing that they print on my gravestone is, I hope that's Scott Bestul. He was a really good deer hunter.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, come on, and like you said, you kill a nice buck, your boys are not be like, wow, our dad's really special.
Right.
You know?
They'll be just as excited. They'll be excited to go track that deer, but they would be just as excited to go track a doe or a
Exactly.
spike or to go
Yeah.
fishing. Anything, right?
Exactly.
And
Yeah, and the thing about, we really do, isn't it is just a fascinating aspect of the, this the Facebook, Instagram, social media craze is, we think people are paying a whole lot more attention to us than they really are. And like you said, yeah, I mean, you shoot that buck and, your close circle is gonna be like, "Way to go, Mark. Way to go, Scott. Great job."
mhm,
And a week later, I mean, if somebody off the street said, "Did Bestel get a buck this year?" And I'd be like, "Huh, was that this year or was that last year?"
yeah.
What was it? I can't remember which deer that was. I've only had one guy who said, and this happened a long time ago, but I had my editor from Field and Stream was with me and we were hunting together and it was the peak of the rut and at 10:30 in the morning, I hadn't seen a single deer all morning. At 10:30 in the morning, I look up and here comes a 10-pointer walking right to my tree. Wasn't the biggest buck in the world, a nice solid, probably a 3-year-old, but just a pretty deer, made my heart jump, and I'm like, I want him. So anyway, he walked in, we got him, made a nice bow shot on him, and anyway, didn't even post it on Facebook or anything. I just sent it to a few friends. Hey, lucked out on this 10-pointer. And one guy said, it was really fascinating to me. It blew me away. It took him about a day, and he finally got back to me and he goes, I've been looking at your buck picture, and I realized that someone in your position, he knew I was an outdoor writer, sometimes has to kill a deer to give himself credibility. And I was like, really?
Wow.
I took an animal so that I could look good for my readers? I'm sorry, I don't do that.
Yeah.
When I see a buck coming, the last thing on my mind is, what are people gonna think of me if I if I tag this deer, if I pass this deer?
Mhm.
So anyway, that's the only time I've ever encountered that. And so I took a deep breath, I let it rest for a minute, and then I got back to him later and I'm like, I think you misunderstand me. I said, I shot that buck because I'm super proud of it, and he made me really excited. And I think he might have apologized later. I don't know. But anyway, I thought it was important to point out that I don't do that. I don't look at deer hunting that way. And I learned, I mean, like every young hunter, I went through a period where I was just stacking them up, in my teens and early 20s. It was important to, tag, and we group bagged unashamedly. I mean, it was legal and we drove deer. So, man, if you were tagged out and a buck walked in front of you on a deer drive and you had open tags, you shot it. I mean, that's just what we did. And so anyway, there was a time, when it was important for me to get my buck. But it's interesting. I don't know if I remember the specific deer, but I remember I was in my mid to late 20s and I shot a buck and I think my tag was filled and I had shot it because I knew somebody was looking for meat. Anyway, I shot that deer and I walked up to it and I'm like, you just killed this thing for a guy that He can kill his own deer, I mean, this is I don't know, it kinda hit me then that was like, this is kinda serious business. I mean, you're taking a life, And
Yeah.
I have a lot of love and respect for whitetail deer, and killing them is not something that I do lightly, it's a fairly big deal to me, even if it's a doe,
Yeah.
just a doe.
Yeah.
Um, I'm very grateful and humbled, by that experience. I'm super happy. I know I'm gonna have meat. I achieved a goal, I sat out there in the cold or whatever, and I got my deer, but, you know, I mean, I killed something, and I think we need to be honorable about that. Um,
Yeah.
it's a big deal, in my opinion.
Yeah. So true. Um, but I think what you're describing there earlier with your friend who made that comment, I don't think that is uncommon for people, especially like younger people these days, like my age and younger, who grew up in this social media world,
Yeah,
where everyone feels like they are on a platform and everyone's watching them and everyone's commenting. Like everyone has an opinion in the internet age. And
yeah,
so and
yeah,
so whether we like it or not, like I know that if I shoot a deer and if I choose to share that with the world, or if uniquely have like a video showcasing what happens, in the back of my mind, I know there are going to be people with opinions who are going to share them and who
yep,
will talk badly about me or my decisions or what I did or how I did it. And so in this weird world we live in now. Um, it is a really unfortunate side effect that we almost can't avoid that. If you choose to share this stuff with the world, you're going
yeah,
to have negativity out there.
yeah,
Um, and so what I'm learning is that I need to more and more dissociate myself and like my self-worth and who I am from, you know, hunting success, quote unquote success.
yeah,
And the more I have, for too long in my early years, I attached like my own value to my hunting success. So like I
sure.
wasn't good enough if I wasn't killing as many deer as this guy or that guy or big enough deer or whatever. And
We
the
all
more
do
I've
that,
re-
I think. Yep.
yeah, and the
Yeah,
more that I've realized like that's not actually important in the big scheme of things, the
yeah,
better I feel and the more I enjoy it. Um I mean what I have found is that I have not just like been able to flip a switch and all of a sudden not care about these things ever, but I have become more self-aware and I can catch myself when I have those moments where I'm slipping down that slope and I can be like, whoa, 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 Mark, that doesn't matter. Step back, focus on the things that do. But it's a constant kind of seesaw or something that I'm on. As
good
I,
for you, though. That's huge.
I guess that's a step in the right direction, if nothing
No, and
else.
I find myself on a similar path because I do like you, I enjoy the work. I have I don't know what my goals are. I mean, I guess my basic goal is I wanna shoot a deer that makes my knees knock, that gets my heart
Hmm.
racing, and, I mean, I've got several deer on camera going in every season where I'm like, "Boy, I'd like to see him with a bow in my
Hmm.
hand," but I don't I've tried to avoid the one buck mission and you know, uh, targeting a specific deer, although I have done that and it can be exciting, but, I think when you set yourself again, goals are great, but I think you just gotta temper them and your ability to say, "Wait a minute, I'm feeling kinda funky here. Do I need to step back and kinda reevaluate how I'm approaching this or thinking about that?" I think that's a huge step. That's you know, we all need to be able to do that 'cause, as you said, um I mean, this is supposed to be fun. I mean, we gotta have
Yeah.
fun, and, I remember I was hunting a property, a pretty exclusive property in Southern Iowa, um, uh, you know, uh, fairly large, managed intensively, um, and the standards were pretty high. I mean, it was like a 150 or 160 minimum, so anyway, you go out in the woods and you're just terrified you're gonna shoot the wrong deer. And I remember
Yeah.
describing that to my wife, and she's like, "Why are you hunting there? It doesn't sound like you're having very much fun." And I'm like, I didn't say it, but I'm like, "That's kind of a good point." Am
Yeah.
I really having fun? I mean, I'm on this place that most guys would just kill to hunt, it's 3,000 acres or whatever. I mean, it's just, probably one of the best hunting properties in the North America, and, anyway, yeah. Uh,
W-
so
Well, along those same lines, Scott, I found when I'm out there hunting for a mature buck,
Mhm.
And when you're out there after mature buck, you know that there's so much that you have to do just right, right? You can't make this mistake. You can't make that mistake. You have to have the perfect access route. You need to have the perfect exit route. You got to make sure you're thinking about your wind direction. Make sure you're thinking about where these deer are going to travel. How will the mature buck move through here? How will you evade, the noses and the eyes of every single doe? And make sure you don't crack that twig when you're walking in. And make sure that when you're up in the tree stand, you do this, that, and the other. There's so much stuff, right?
Yeah.
And I find myself constantly tense. It's a very tense experience, and so the stakes seem so high, and the pressure is on everything. As soon as I flip the switch to not targeting a mature buck and instead just trying to shoot does,
Mhm.
everything changes, and all of a sudden it's like, oh man, this is fun. This is the fun hunting. And
Yeah.
what an idiot! Like what an idiot I am that I don't allow myself to have fun out there until the last like 3 weeks of the season when I start focusing on does and to like there's something there that for some reason I don't notice early enough in the year or apply to the rest of the year. That
Sure.
something changes for me when I shift from trying to kill a mature buck to instead being okay with, you know, hunting for does. And how can I apply that feeling or that level of just having fun with it to the rest of my year? Or do I need to change my goals to feel that way the whole year? I'm not sure what the takeaway there is, but there's something there when I have a totally different hunting experience, and one of them is largely more fun than the other.
Yeah.
Um, there's something there to learn.
And it's fascinating because really when you think about it, and I've had this discussion with several guys, um, you know, in my mind, especially when we're at this phase of the season where we've been through early archery and most of the firearms and muzzleloader, now we're down to we're kind of down to the bare bone stuff. I will I will stand on this. The smartest deer in the herd is a mature doe. She
Hmm.
has spent her entire life doing nothing but raising babies and getting them through, this gauntlet of predators and hunters and cars and all kinds of things. And when she steps out onto a field or a food plot, man, her radar is on. And I've
Yeah,
seen mature bucks act like complete dopes this time of year. Like, I'm so damn hungry, I'm just gonna go out there and eat. I don't care
yeah.
what's happening. So it's fascinating, isn't it? That we're just hunting a doe. Well, I
Hmm.
tell you what, that big old nanny with a head like a burro, she's a pretty tough customer. You put an arrow in her this time of year, you've done something. I mean,
Yeah,
you may not get your picture on the cover of a magazine or be an Instagram hero,
yeah.
but man, I tell you what, I shot one a couple falls or a couple winters back. It was the coldest night of the season, and I couldn't believe it. I bumped that deer and there was two other does and a couple fawns. They were all on the food plot when I got there. It wasn't a food plot. It was a stubble field. Anyway, they trotted off. They saw me coming from a half a mile away, and I'm like, oh, the night is done. But I'm like, well, I've walked this far. I actually snowshoed into this place. It was that far off the road.
Wow.
So I'm like, well, I'm just gonna crawl up in the tree and, whittle away the rest of the afternoon. It was the last night of the season. And I crawled up my tree and I couldn't believe it. 20 minutes before dark, here they come back out, and that big nanny doe was leading the way, and she stuck her head out of the woods, and she just sat there looking while all the other deer piled out into this corn stubble, and she finally walked out there. I shot her. She made like a little 30-yard loop and collapsed in the field, and I don't know. I must be getting old and sappy, but I walked up to that deer and I knelt in the snow and I cried. I mean, I was so proud of that. It was
Yeah.
just like that was the deer. I don't know. Yeah, it would have been cool. She was wearing a 150-inch 10-point rack, but she wasn't. But she's probably 7 years old. I'm
Yeah.
like, what has that old gal seen in her lifetime? And that was a heck of a trophy. Yeah.
That's
Anyway,
pretty special.
and
That's
it's
pretty
interesting.
great.
I did post that picture of that deer on Facebook, and I had three different guys go, "That's a shed buck." And I'm like, "Trust me, no pedicles, and I field dressed her. There was the right
Yeah.
plumbing to be a doe was there, but she was
Oh man,
huge. So I'd hate to guess how old she was. It's
that's
pretty
amazing.
special. Anyway, so yeah, the old just a doe thing. That's interesting because I mean I do the same thing. I think exactly the same way. Well, let's just go out and have some fun, shoot some
Yeah.
does.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe we can apply that to larger parts of the year somehow. Well,
Right.
there might be a way to do that. A couple different ways to do that, but one of them you mentioned, and I'm curious if you did this for this reason. You mentioned that you use a recurve sometimes, or maybe all
Yep.
the time now, I guess I'm not sure. But was the decision to start using a recurve something related to all of this in some kind of way? Because I've started thinking maybe that's something I should try. Because all of a sudden, any deer with a recurve would be really a heck of an accomplishment and something super exciting and might be very different and a fun new thing for me to do rather than obsess over, the 140-inch 4-year-old that's within 5 square miles of me.
Right. Yeah. You sound like you hunt where I do. No, I it's interesting. So I after I told you about that first year that I got 2 P&Y bucks in a week, and I think it was a year or 2 after that, I was kind of inspired by the Wenzel brothers and, Paul Schaefer and some of these other guys, and so, yeah, I picked up a recurve and, I hunted exclusively with a recurve for over a decade. And it was fun. It was sometimes frustrating. Yeah, you pass some shots at deer that you probably would have taken with a compound. But so anyway, then my kids were born, and for me anyway, it takes a lot of practice to be proficient with a recurve. I have to shoot every day just to burn that into my muscle memory and really stay sharp. And so anyway, when my kids, I have boy girl twins, and all of a sudden life got really, really busy, and practicing was not as easy it was. And so, and plus I was writing more and more about bow hunting and testing bows, and I'm like, I gotta be. So I hadn't shot a compound bow in 10 years, so they'd obviously changed quite a bit.
Yeah.
When I picked up the new ones, I was like, holy cow, these things are really good.
Yeah.
So anyway, so then I shot compounds for, for many, many years. Well, then now my kids are grown and off on their own, and I'm like, I've got a cousin who continues, and he not only shoots recurves, he builds them. And so anyway, he just kept kind of gently, really gently working on me, like, I could build you a bow. And so anyway, I was like, you know what? And I talked it over with a friend, and he said, hey, you don't shoot that many bucks anymore anyway, so why do you care? And then I started thinking about it, and I'm like, my maximum range with a recurve, 15 yards is like ideal. I can do 20 if the situation is right. And then I thought, Bestel, how many of the deer that you shot with a compound were further than 20 yards away? And I could think of like 3, almost all of them they're just right there. And that's to me, you talk about goal settings. One of my greatest goals and challenges as a bow hunter is, where do I set my stand to get that super killing shot? I'm not
Yeah.
interested in killing a deer at 50 yards. Zero interest in it.
Yeah.
I just won't shoot that. I don't care if I can do it on a target course. This is just me. I'm not talking about people who like to shoot long range. This is just my thing. My joy is setting a tree stand or a ground blind or whatever so that I can get a close range shot at a mature buck. And that, I'm like, why can't I use a recurve for that? And I can. So yeah. So anyway, I started getting serious about it last summer and shooting, and I've hunted with one all this fall, and yeah, it's funny. I've got a little judo point. I got an arrow with a judo point on it, and when I walk out after a morning hunt, I'm shooting at leaves and stumps and sticks, and it's just a blast. I enjoy it. There's just something about. So yeah, it's brought some joy into my life. I like it. Yeah, I'd
That's
recommend
great.
it.
So that I think is a perfect place to send us to end it.
Okay.
The recurve is something that's brought some more joy to your hunting life. We've talked about some of the social stuff. Are there any other ideas that you would want to leave folks with as we wrap this conversation up here and now with folks? They might have 3 to 5 weeks of hunting left, depending on what state they're in. For this last phase of the hunting season, what final words of wisdom would you give folks to help them, make the very most of these final weeks?
Yeah, I think I indicated earlier in the show, I this is one of my favorite parts of the season, and I think part of it is maybe because I used to be a competitive runner, and so I value endurance. And when you've gotten this far and you're still hunting, you've proved you've got endurance. You can keep plugging away, and I think that's kind of a little badge of honor. It might be a minor one for some people, but um Yeah, and for one thing, I know how long it's gonna be till that next hunting season comes around, so I wanna milk everything I can out of these last few weeks and enjoy it. You know, the sunsets and sunrises of winter to me are the most spectacular and beautiful. I love every minute of that part of it. Um, and to me, I don't know. The other thing that I mean, it's a little bit selfish too, is that I mean, I hunt a lot during the rut, and I see as many mature bucks now from now till the end of December. We close December 31st. I typically, if we get the right weather and I can find the food, I'll see as many mature bucks in the next 3 weeks as I will the entire month of November. And that's just my area. I'm just lucky. You know, I've got some farms that don't get pressured very hard in December. Um, so anyway, yeah, I don't know. I think you just gotta keep the faith and recharge. Sometimes, you know, it feels good to take a couple days off. Like today, it's gonna be 45 around here, so I'm not going deer hunting. It's like, give the deer, you know, I need a couple of days of, you know, reset and recharge my batteries. I don't think the deer are gonna move that great tonight. Um, but anyway, when the weather flips, and it's gonna in 2 days, I'm gonna be out there, and I'm gonna keep plugging away to the bitter end just 'cause I love it. I wanna say goodbye to the season in a proper way, which to me is in a tree stand.
I love it. I love it. I'll be doing the same, Scott. I
Cool.
really do appreciate you taking the time to do this, and I guess I want to give you a chance if there's any specific article or place that you would want to send folks to read more of your work or to stay up to date on some of the things you're sharing out there with Field and Stream, or anything else that you'd like to send folks towards to take a look at.
Sure. Well, I'm mostly writing this time of year. I'm mostly writing for fieldandstream.com, so the website, and yeah, we've got some how-to stuff and some big buck stories. There's been some tremendous deer killed this year. It's just it amazes me. I mean, we are living in the good old days of whitetail hunting right now. I mean,
Yeah.
I can remember it used to be a huge deal when, you know, for the magazine, we'd find a single 200-inch deer in the fall, you know, and now, I mean, good lord, just raining on us, you know.
Yeah.
There's just some tremendous deer out there, and hunters, I tell you what, hunters are just better now than they've ever been. I mean, the average 25-year-old whitetail hunter in America right now knows way more than I knew before I was 40. I mean,
Yeah.
you know, they just know, you know. They got good spots and they know how to hunt them. So anyway, but yeah, go to fieldandstream.com. You might find some good stuff, and I'm really honored to be on this show, and I appreciate your approach, and you're really a smart and sensitive and really sharp deer hunter, and I appreciate it. Your presence is greatly appreciated on the deer hunting landscape for me.
Well, thank you, Scott. I appreciate you saying that, and thank you again for everything you're doing, for being here today, for answering my email 17 years ago or whatever it was, and for continuing to be a great voice and leader in our space. And I really enjoy your guys' print magazine. I'm glad it's back. Great
Me
work on
too.
that.
It's exciting to see you actually have a magazine you can hold on to again.
Yeah,
Yep.
it's a really great product, a really nice, physical, beautiful magazine. So I'm looking forward to the future issues too.
Cool. I hope there's a lot of them. Thanks, Mark.
Thank you. And that is going to do it for us here today. Thanks for joining me. I hope you found value in this conversation, and I hope it will help inspire and inform you for these final weeks of the year. Let's make the most of it. Let's enjoy this hunting season. Let's have a lot of fun out there. Let's fill a tag or two more if possible. Let's enjoy the company of our friends and family, and let's end this season on a high note. Thanks for being here, and stay wired to hunt.